If anybody's searching for a great job in Hanover, Germany, please let me know. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to talk about Angular Translate, personal project. And first of all, I would like to ask, how many people in this room have already heard about Angular Translate? Okay. How many people in this room already use it? That's awesome. Cool. Great. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Pascal Precht. This is my Twitter handle and also my GitHub handle. And I work at Neoscope, as you already know. We do some web thing and we do it well. And I really like animated GIFs. So if anybody in this room has some awesome GIFs to share, please let me know. This is one of them from a trip from Neoscope. So just, we are hiring. So, Angular Translate. What is Angular Translate? Angular Translate, of course, is a module to bring internationalization to your Angular apps. But it wasn't always Angular Translate. So in the earlier this year, I started a project at Neoscope, and it was about an app, a mobile app, which had to be deployed on several platforms. So the app had to be deployed on the web and also on different touch devices, such as iPads or Nexus devices also, as hybrid apps using PhoneGap and Bake Them, right? So, and then it turned out that we not only had to deploy these apps for different platforms, we also had to deploy them for several languages. And so that means we had to make sure that one app is available for language 1 and language 2. So it wasn't a requirement to make sure that you can switch the language at runtime, but we had to make it possible to decide at the build process in which language the app is built. So I decided to build a filter function in AngularJS, this filter service. And basically all it did was it just replaced some translation IDs with some concrete texts, and that's basically it. So I thought this is a cool thing and put it into a module and called it ng translate. So this was the original name of Angular Translate. Sorry. And then I posted it to the G+ community and said, hey, well, this is my internationalization module called ng translate. Maybe some of you guys can use it or so. And the community was like, well, yeah, they found it pretty cool, but there were a lot of things we can do with it. That it was just this filter function and nothing more. So there were a lot of feature requests and stuff like that, and the whole project has grown a lot. And now it's Angular Translate, so a lot of changes. It is about, almost a year old now. Okay, so Angular Translate has some features. Of course, you have a service to translate your contents from your app. It has the filter, the original filter. It also provides a directive to translate your contents. Variable replacement, which is done through the AngularJS interpolation service. You can interpolate some dynamic values and some strings, and this is just basically it. But you're also able to add different interpolation services. For example, if you have translation texts with a different syntax than the one that the interpolate service expects, then you can build your own interpolation service adapter and hook it up to Angular Translate. Of course, it has multi-language support, so you are also able to make it possible to switch the language at runtime without even reloading the whole page, which is awesome. Asynchronous loading is also a big feature, so you're able to say, you don't have to deploy your translations within your app. So you can say you hook up an asynchronous loading for your app so that the internationalization data is loaded asynchronously once it's really needed. And yeah, then there is pluralization. This is done by using the message format JS library, which is yeah, pretty much the best thing I could find in the internet. And we decided to not implement the whole pluralization features in Angular Translate itself, but rather yeah, hook that message format JS library up to Angular Translate. So you're also able to do that. Okay, so let's have a little look. I'm not a designer, and I guess some of you guys can see it here, so I will zoom in a little bit. Maybe this is better. Okay, so this is a conceptual overview of Angular Translate, and it shows how these components are stick together and how they are connected and how they communicate, right? So the green box here is the translate directive. Below that we have the filter translate, which is just the filter. And then we have this big, this big kind of red box, which is the translate service. And as you can see, there are a lot of other boxes in this box. And it's like, these boxes are within this translate service box because the translate service is the actual component within Angular Translate, which takes care of communicate with this other components. So we have here, the interpolator, which is just the usage of the default interpolation service from AngularJS. And then we have this message format interpolator, which is an adapter service that hooks up the message format library to Angular Translate if you need it. On the left, we have the missing translation handler. So you're also able to react on some situations when you have, for example, there's a case where you translate your app and then you switch the language and it turned out that there is a missing translation ID for a given language. Then you can react on that. And by default, Angular Translate ships with the missing translation handler. Or actually, it's not by default in there, but you can install it as extensions. All these things are extensions, so to keep the core as small as possible, right? The blue box is about asynchronous loader. There is the URL loader and then the static files loader. The URL loader is a loader to define an endpoint on a server where you can load the internationalization data from. And the static files loader provides a mechanism to define a kind of pattern how your translation data look like on the server. So you can have several internationalization data files, JSON files, which follow a certain pattern, and the static files loader would take care of loading them, right? Okay, and then on the left there is storage, and this is probably not what you think. This layer is not about storing your translation data in some kind of storage, like local storage or cookie storage. It's more about making it possible to let your app remember which language was used by a user when he first visited your app. So if you provide an application with, for example, 2 languages and the user decided to use the second language rather than the first language, which is the default language, then the storage would take care of that, and the next time when the user comes across your app, the right language is chosen, right? Okay, so that's the conceptual overview, and I'm sure you're bored now, so we get into it right now. The installation process, there are actually 3 different ways to install Angular Translate. We'll zoom in a little bit right here. So the first way is to use Git. You can just clone the repository, it's on GitHub, then cd into the repository, into the project, and install all dependencies with npm and Bower. If you don't know Bower is a package manager from Twitter, which is really awesome. So you can install packages for front-end tooling and stuff like that. And once you did that, you can just run grunt build. Grunt is a task runner. Angular Translate sits on top of that. And yeah, you're actually able to make a custom build of Angular Translate. So if there's anything you don't like about it, you can tweak it and then make a custom build of that. This is also the process you should choose when you're one of the cool guys who want to help out on this, right? So if you say, hey, there's something I can do better, or there's a missing feature, you have to go this way, and yeah, then you have to send a pull request for sure. The second way is to use Bower, and yeah, that's all you have to do. You just have to go to your terminal, which is this black box, and you have to type in Bower install Angular Translate, and that's it. Really, that's just it. And I think this is pretty much mind-blowing. We only actually the backend provided something like that for a long time via NPM, and now we have some such things with Bower, which is just a cool thing. You don't have to care about all these dependencies, and you don't have to open the file in the browser and then select everything and copy and paste in your editor and save and stuff like that. So you just have to say a Bower install, and you get your package in your configured Bower folder. Yeah, and the third way is to just click that button on the home page. So Angular Translate has a home page right here. And this is the button. Just click download, and what you get is the package, which contains the Angular Translate source as development version and as production version, so a minified version. Yeah, of course, we can view it on GitHub, and yeah, that's it about installation. Oh yeah, last but not least, you also have to, for sure, embed the module in your application after AngularJS to use it, right? Okay, so we are able to install Angular Translate. Now we are ready to rock, and we build a little app. The first thing you have to know is the Translate provider. So once you have Angular Translate hooked up, you can use the Translate provider to configure the Translate service. If you don't know the architecture system from AngularJS about providers and services, actually every service has a provider, even if you don't know. If you say Angular.module, my module, and then something like .factory, my factory, AngularJS will create a provider for you behind the scenes. You don't have to care about that. This is because Angular's injector service needs a provider to get an instance of any kind of service. Each provider has to have an $get method, and then this method should return the instance of a service. So the actual relation between a provider and a service is that you use the provider to configure your services, right? So they're the interface to make something different in your services. They are also only accessible during config phases, so whereas normal services, service instances are only available at runtime. So the Translate provider takes care of many stuff. Of course, it teaches your app languages. So if you want to make sure that your app provides different languages, you have to make sure that your app knows about different languages. And this is done through the Translate provider. So you use the Translate provider to say, Angular Translate, hey Angular Translate, this is my app, and this app should support language A and language B, right? It also takes care about letting your app remember the language. This is what I said when I was talking about the storage stuff. You can configure that with the Translate provider too. It also hooks up the asynchronous loader. So the goal was to make it as easy as possible for the developer to hook up that kind of system. So when you say you want to load your internationalization data asynchronously, you don't have to do much stuff. It's just something like Translate provider, please use that loader and take care of the rest, right? but we will get into it in a minute. Yeah, and it also manages the different interpolation services. So as I said, there is the default interpolation service, which is just the service from AngularJS, but you're also able to implement your own services or use another service like the one for message format. Sorry? Yeah.
What do you mean by interpolation service? Is it something I should know?
Okay, so the question was what I actually mean with the interpolation service. So your internationalization data is actually just strings, right? And it could be possible that in these strings that there are some dynamic values. Something like you have n messages in your inbox or so. So you have this translation with this string and this dynamic value, and you want to make it possible that this dynamic value is dynamic, so you have to put something dynamic in. Yeah, right? And the interpolation service takes care of interpolate your string against some values, some possible values. Okay, so to use it you just have to first say that this module is a dependency of your app, and then you can, during the config function, inject the translate provider, and then you're ready to go. So teaching your app a language. What's the typical flow? There are a few things. You actually just have to know how do you want to provide your internationalization data. So this is either statically or asynchronously. Then you have to Angular Translate know that there are these languages, which you do with the translate provider. And then you can translate your app using the provided components like the filter and the directive. So registering translations is like this. Angular Translate consumes translation tables, and translation tables are nothing more than just a JavaScript hash object, right? Where the key is a translation ID, like the app title right here, and the introduction text, and the value is the concrete translation itself, right? So to say, to add a translation table, you just have to say translate provided.translation, which is a method it provides, and you can just add a language to your app. So just to make your app know that there is this language. Then you have to translate your app, and this is pretty funny. So you can, this is how it looks before you translate your app, and if you want to translate, it becomes to this here. And this is just the usage of the filter, which is available once you have defined this module as dependency. Another way of translating your content is with the translate directive. So you pass in a translation ID and it takes care of the rest. Here's a little demo. I thought I make a cool Dutch AngularJS website, which you can see here. There are some talks, I don't know of the guys, but they seem to be pretty cool. And if we take a look at the code, there's nothing special right here. So we have some talks right here on the scope, on the controller, right? And there's a topic for each talk, and there's also a text for each talk, which is just this translation ID right here. And here, we're adding the concrete translations, right? So rather than having just two, like in the example in the previous slides, we just have a bit more. And in the HTML, we translate our app just using either the translation, the translate directive, or the translate filter, right? Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay. So this is the new site. I think this is a cool thing for the next meetup as well. All right. There's also more on the translate provider. You can read it online in the docs. There are beautiful docs. We take care of beautiful docs. And yeah, if there's anything you don't like, let us know, please.
Yeah. I've been using WordPress a lot, I know. But in their translation system, they choose to let just the original string be the key for the translation. Is there a special reason you chose this method for a key and then the translated version in all different languages, or is it just...
Okay, so I decided to do that because I didn't know it better.
Okay, so there's no special design.
So in my apprenticeship, I just learned it that way, that there are translation IDs and translation strings, and that's it. So,
I would have the whole section about that.
Okay, that's cool.
so yeah, questions after the talk, okay? So we get out of time. So this is the moment where you would think, wait, this is just placeholding stuff, right? So what the fuck is this guy talking about? How about multi-language support? Let's get into this. So multi-language. How's the typical flow of multi-language? Yeah, you have to, again, provide some translation tables, but not only one, just like in the example before, but you can add more translation tables by key. You have to provide a language key to identify your translation table. Then you tell your app what languages is actually the default language of the app. So if you say there are two languages, the app has to know which one to choose when running, right? And this is how it looks like. So again, we have this method here, translations, but now we pass in the language key as first parameter, whereas the translation table is the second parameter. And we do the same for the English, for the German language. So this is a translation table for the English language, and we have the same here for the German language. So now the app knows about two different translation tables. How to tell the app which language to use? There's this fancy method called preferred language. Is that easy? You just tell the provider prefer this language, and you pass in the translation, the language key from the language you want to prefer. Right? Okay, so there's also a demo for that. Show that one. Again, this beautiful website, and in the markup nothing has changed. But in the script, you can see there is much more translation stuff happening. So we have now two translation tables for each language. And we say that the preferred language is English with this little guy right here. So when I now say the default language is German rather than English, boosh, we have a German site. So that's basically it, right? Okay. So actually, this is cool, but we want to switch the language at runtime. We don't want to make clunker update our app over and over again. So we have to make it possible to somehow say that we want to switch the language at certain situations. For that, we can use the translate service, which is the corresponding service to the translate provider. And it has this cool method called uses. And all you have to do is to call this method with the language key of the language you want to switch to, right? So what you see here, is a language controller. We inject the scope in the translate service, and we define a function on the scope, switch language, which gets a language key, and then we just call translate uses. And translate uses without, if you call translate uses without any argument, you will get the language key from the language which is currently used. And if you pass in the language key, Angular Translate will change the language. If you're using asynchronous loader, it will also call the asynchronous loader to get your data before it actually changed the language. So if you pass on an argument, you get a promise from this method. So you can react on something like that. If the language has changed, then do this or that. So this is also possible. And in the markup, we just define an ng-click directive right here, the switch language. And that's basically it. Check out the demo. You guys should know this site. And here are these two buttons. Nothing has changed, but this controller was added, right? The same code you saw on the previous slide. So now, when I click German, whoosh, the site is German, whoop. And when I click English, it's English, right? That's it. This is the moment where you can clap, by the way. So that's internationalization and multi-language support from Angular Translate. Okay, so you probably think, yeah, this is cool, but you don't want to blow up your JavaScript code because you have to provide the translation tables during the config function with the translate provider. And this is the moment where I say, that's okay, I understand that really this is shitty, because if you have, I don't know, 5 languages or so, that means you have 5 translation tables with not only 10 translation IDs, but I don't know, maybe 100. So we have 500 translation IDs. And this is where asynchronous loading comes in. So there are 3 supported loaders. The URL loader I mentioned before, the static files loader, and there's also the partial loader, which takes care of loading the internationalization data on the module level. So you can load your translations not all at once, but only for a specific module if it's really needed. This is for larger applications. So the static files loader is the one I would like to get into. You can install it with Bower for sure. It's as easy as this. Bower install Angular Translate loader static files, and you get the source. And of course, you have to inject it after that. Embed it, sorry. And then you can just use a loader. So the translate provider has this method called use static files loader. This is all you have to do. And all you have to do is to define this pattern I was talking about. So you have to define a prefix and a suffix. And then the static files loader makes a request when it's needed. It makes a request to a server with the endpoint you set. So the request would actually look like this. Yeah? It puts the used language key between the prefix and the suffix. And this is the request it does. So again, a little demo. Okay. So the same application, nothing has changed here in the markup. Everything's the same. But in the app, I commented out this this translation table right here. What I do now is I use this static files loader. I say, okay, this is my prefix and this is my suffix. And I also say that the preferred language is English. What now happens is that once the first time the translate service gets instantiated, it checks if there is the translation table for the given language key, for the language that is requested. If that's not the case, the translate service will take care of asynchronously loading the data. Yeah, if a loader is registered, for sure. So I have this JSON files right here, which is just a JSON with the same data we already saw in the app.js file. And yeah, when I now switch the language, this is English right now. When I now switch the language to German, it actually loads the data synchronously. We can check this when we take a look at the network process right here. I will refresh the page. Okay. So clear that thing. So now the English language is used and it's already loaded. When I now switch to the German language, you can see that there is this request happening to the JSON file, right? So that's asynchronous loading. Yeah, you can also read more about asynchronous loading. There are 3 loaders. You're also able to build your own custom loaders if none of these loaders fits to your needs. so that's also possible. Actually, everything in Angular Translate is possible to customize, right? So yeah. The last thing I want to show is this variable replacement stuff. This is about the interpolation thing that's going on. So let's assume we have this translation here, which is just an inbox text. You have X new messages. And in the markup, it would look like this. If you use the translate directive, there's also an attribute called translate values right here. And you can pass in either an AngularJS expression, which gets evaluated behind the scenes, or you can also put in an interpolation directive. So if something's dynamic, you can also do something like these double curly braces and then an identifier from a property on scope. And you can also pass in a string, which gets then passed first and then evaluated. So the result in that case would be you have 3 new messages. Same goes for the translate filter. We have the same translation right here. And when we use the filter, which is here, we can do this double colon right here, and then we can pass in an expression as well. We can also pass in a string with an expression, so both of this is possible. And the result would again be you have 3 messages. And of course the translate service also supports this thing, because the translate service is what's used behind the scenes. If you use the directive and the filter, you actually use the service, even if you don't know about it. So if you translate your contents with the translate service, you can just invoke this service as a function, as you can see here. The first parameter is the translation ID, and the second parameter is an object with your variable replacements, where the identifier match to the identifier from the interpolation directive, right? Just a little demo. So this is just a tiny thing, just to show how these things work. So here's the talks 3 speakers title right here, and where is it in the markup? Ah, here. Here we have this. Can you guys see this? Here, we have this translate directive, talks title, and then we have translate values, which is just data. And data is defined on the scope right here. It's a bit, so this is the data. And the translation ID would be just like, where is it? Here. The talks title is this one. So that's basically it. This is not the best example, because this translation ID also contains some pluralization. This word messages could also be message if there's only one message. But yeah, you get the idea. So yeah, there's actually so much more to cover in Angular Translate. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go all through it. But yeah, you should check it out. There's this website, there's this repository on GitHub. And by the way, one thing I would like to mention is that this project is pretty much community driven. So if there's anything where you think which could be done better, or I don't know, there's a missing feature or so, please let us know. Just file an issue or submit a pull request or something like that. They are currently working, I don't know, about 4 people on this project. One of them lives in the Ukraine, and this was the first project he contributed to, and the first project he contributed to on GitHub. So if you're one of those guys who say, yeah, well, I never did that before, then I really encourage you to do that, and we would happily merge your stuff in, okay? So that's it from me, thanks. questions? Yeah.
How do you handle pluralization?
Okay, so the question was, how do I handle pluralization? This is the feature I couldn't cover in the talk because it would take too long. But there is this animated GIF is awesome, right? 50 is not that awesome, but this GIF is awesome. Okay, so there is this message from Mark.js. I will show you real quick. Whoosh. Oopala. So this is the repository from message format. You can also install it via bar, and all you have to do is to install that library, embed it, and then there is another extension for Angular Translate, which is the message format interpolation adapter or something like that. You can also install it via bar, and then once you have installed these both libraries or these both sources, you can tell the translate provider which interpolation service to use. So you can say something like, okay, translate provider, please use the interpolation for message format instead the one which is used by default, which is the one which is just the interpolation service from Angular. And this is actually not that cool because this means you have to decide if your whole application interpolates against or interpolates with the default interpolation service, or if it interpolates with the message format interpolation service. We had to introduce a new service for it because message format has this kind of syntax right here, right? This is how you would write your translations then if you want to have this pluralization. And and because it's not so cool to say you have to either choose the one or the other interpolation, we implemented a hookup system where you can say, okay, please use this interpolation service as default, but in certain cases, please use the other interpolation service. So there's another directive attribute, and so you can say in the markup in a declarative way that you want to use the message format interpolation in this specific case. Yeah, and this is how we handle it. So we just adapt the functionality from message format. We hadn't implemented anything in terms of pluralization. It's just taking the power of message format into Angular Translate. Yeah.
Which feature, oh sorry, on which feature are you working on now?
Oh, that's a good question. So the question was, what is the feature I'm currently working on? If you take a look at the list of issues, there are about over 30 right now, which is actually pretty cool. But yeah, there's a big issue with Angular Translate, which is we have this filter and we have this directive. And originally I introduced the directive because somewhere I read something like too much filters are not good enough, are not good for your Angular because there are too many watches, which slows down your app. So I decided to introduce a directive, but actually currently the directive also introduces watches. So this is actually not really a performance boost in that case, which means I'm currently working on the translate directive to make it better, so that it not watch all the time of the translation ID, because it only has to watch once when the language changes. This is everything. That's all what's changing when the app is running. So, but that's a big thing. We have to manually compile that stuff and. Yeah, that's why I'm currently digging the Angular source. So, yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
You can put a preferred language, so you can i18n, for example. But can you also put like the HTTP accept language header in there, which has multiple languages? So I say I want Dutch with a quality of 0.8, and I want English with a quality of 0.3 or something. So it will dynamically choose whichever language is available in the application and which my browser would prefer.
Okay, yeah, this is also a really awesome question. So the question was if it's possible to just let the browser decide which language to use, right? Yeah. So this is a request which is already in the issue list. Somebody came up with this because there is any kind of Python library which also did something like that. And yeah, I would love to get something like that into Angular Translate. So it will probably land, but it's not possible.
It would basically mean that you would have the option to set multiple preferred languages in a certain order.
Yeah, right.
And should decide which.
But if you want to, you can.
Here's your development.
Sorry?
Here's your development.
That's what I wanted to say. So you're in the team. Yeah.
So, is there some way that when you change the language, it also loads a different number formats from Angular locale?
I don't know.
Because when you change the language, you
Yeah.
probably also want to change the commas or the dots.
Yeah, right. So yeah, okay, okay, I get the
There's a
idea.
module in Angular that has all the
Yeah.
dots and everything.
Yeah, right.
And it would be really cool to dynamically
So-
that as well.
So the what is currently possible is you can achieve that kind of functionality with different translation IDs. So for example, if you have a translation ID which has a text, for example, with any kind of costs, so this costs 22 euros or so, and in the US it's actually dollars, so you want to apply a filter on it, depending on which language you are in. So yeah, this is how you could actually achieve this. So you have to provide these different filters within your translation, and then have to pass in some value from the outside.
Okay, but you're not using the Angular localize thing for that?
I never try to combine these two things.
Excellent development.
Yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
Is there a support for local languages like Canada, French, or English, UK English, US English, Chinese different?
Yeah. So Angular Translate threads each registered language as just a language. So if there are two types of English, then you have to provide two types of English with two different language keys. That's basically it.
Is there any plans to support this?
Not yet.
And sorry, one more question about keys.
Mhm.
About keys for translation, is there a support for scope? So some
Namespacing within the translation IDs? Something like that?
When you use, for example, you show us count, something like that. So, for example, is there support for scope? And, for example, something changes in the scope and it automatically changes in your translation.
So yeah, the thing is that when you use the filter and something changes on the scope, there is a digit cycle called, so it gets reevaluated. The new value will be in the text, and the directive sets up two watches to handle this. So yeah. So yeah. Two more.
What happens if you choose language which you do not support? So I choose Chinese now, or I choose from France, French. But you configure them in German and English.
Yeah. So you mean if there is a language change to a language which isn't there?
It's like error handling.
Yeah.
At the bottom are three languages, but you only implemented two
Yeah.
language types.
So yeah, regarding error handling, there's only the error handling for reacting on if the translate service tries to translate a translation ID which doesn't exist. But that's it currently. Yeah.
Your file save to the default language.
Sorry?
Your file save functionality to the default language.
File safe?
If the default language is English,
Sorry.
Do you fall back to the default language if the language that's chosen?
Yeah, so you can control that. There's another method on the beautiful translate provider which is called fallback language. And then you can define the language key for the translation table to which English Translate should fall back if there is. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Does it automatically switch between right to left and left to right languages?
This is a good thing. And I think you're the third person who asked this. No, there's no support for that yet, but we definitely have to get that in. Yeah. So if you want to, please submit a pull request. Yeah.
I learned namespaces already, but is it supported namespaces?
Yeah, definitely. So you can do something like, for example, if you have your translation IDs covered in your JSON files and somebody translate this stuff, for larger applications it could be cool to namespace the translation IDs by, I don't know, application site or something like that. And you can do that with just object, I don't know how to say it in English, it's just the dot notation, you know, when you say something like food.bar. Yeah, right. So you can do that. You just do this in your JSON, and Angular Translate will flatten this stuff. So in the end, you have a translation ID, which is then with dot notation. Yeah. Okay.
Is there a support for caching?
You can do this by your own. There is a function, yeah, we thought about that. This is a good question. And we decided to just make it possible for users to cache if they want to, because caching is a pretty hard topic. You have to decide how to cache and how long to cache and what if something changed on the server or something like that. So we decided to open the doors by providing a method on the translate service, which is called refresh. And the refresh function will drop all translation tables which are registered and revoke them by executing all loaders again and then getting the whole data back. So we have to control this by ourselves. Okay. No more questions? Yes. Thank you.